Welcome to the Wealth Blueprint Podcast, where we bring on guests that will teach you how to break the matrix. Most people are not taught on how to invest, understand how money operates, and learning the secret to living a limitless life. We will give you the knowledge, trials, and insight to create your own wealth blueprint. It's up to you to implement and act. Let's begin. All right, what's going on, guys? Bryce Gonzer back with another episode of the Wealth Blueprint. Today, guys, I'm gonna be your guys' host. I'm also gonna be your guys' guest, and this is not a concept that I came up with, but it is a concept that I came across in a new reading in a book called Everything Divided by 21 Million. So all I am doing is taking this concept, delivering it to you guys, putting my own twist on it. But it's going to be a different kind of almost philosophical approach to Bitcoin. And instead of the whole argument is instead of Bitcoin being invented, and we talk about this new currency being invented, it puts a different twist on it, and it comes at the approach of what if Bitcoin was discovered, right? So bear with me as we're going to go through this process. It's going to get relatively deep. So if you guys have questions, something doesn't make sense, I want it to come through clear. So make sure that if there is anything that is unclear, message me about it, send me a text so that I can further, recreate this presentation and make it deliverable and easy to absorb. So without further ado, this is the discovery of Bitcoin. So our money doesn't seem to be working. In order for money to function properly, it needs to remain stable, right? And it all started with gold. When we found gold 5,000 years ago, we didn't realize what the free market had truly decided. We discovered a stable element that could not be altered. It had a finite supply, and it had a cost to extract from the Earth's crust. Somewhere along the way, though, things changed. We started to use unstable ways of measuring stability and value, and that ultimately came in the form of a fiat currency, which has a shelf life. So as we can see, throughout history, there's been various forms of money. It's gone from seashells to beads to precious stones to metals to these unstable isotopes of the precious metals, which are fiat currency: British pound, Swiss franc, the euro, Canadian dollar, the yen, the US dollar. All of these different variations of what actual hard money should be. So everything at its core is purely information. Everything in the market that we give value is pure information. So this hammer that I have up on screen here that's traded in the market is just information. If we dive deeper into what this hammer is, into this object, we eventually discover that all objects are made of atoms. So, right, consisting of protons, neutrons, electrons, etc. If we go even deeper, right, what makes up a proton, a neutron, electron? We now enter into a realm of quantum physics, where these particles that make up the protons, the neutrons, and electrons are pure information. They're made up of pure probability and math. These particles come and go through our observable physical realm as they are observed in space, called space-time. Space-time can be quantified by quantum physics into a very, very small area called a Planck area. So imagine these Planck areas are pixels that make up our universe. Each pixel contains one bit of information. And a bit is the smallest unit of information. It represents 1 or 0, yes or no, yin or yang. A qubit is both states at once. So both 1 and 0, yes and no, until an observer looks closely at it, and then it collapses into one of these states. So inside each of these Planck areas contains a qubit. So if we zoom out of this probability nature of what a qubit is, there is a higher probability of it falling into one of these states versus the other, which means that in reality, we live in a probabilistic universe at its core. Nobody would ever be able to measure all of these particles in the universe to calculate which way it might fall. Uncertainty is always present. This is good because if we didn't have uncertainty, we would be living in a movie rather than a video game. We wouldn't be able to interact with our environment. Free will would not exist. And again, everything at its core, including human beings, is information. So let's start to simplify things, right? Let's imagine this quantum field of pure information, pure probability, pure math as a sea of uncertainty. And as we as human beings, we're always trying to make things more certain. So what we have within the sea of uncertainty, we have various islands of stability. These islands are made of elements that represent the physical matter that we interact with on a daily basis. Everything in the market that's traded and plays into economics are quantities of these raw elements or stable compositions of them. It's what we know as the periodic table, and we found most of these elements. A market helps us find stability, and from here we find price and the ability to see what others place or do not place value in. Whenever someone finds something stable, like a nail that won't break after hitting it multiple times, we place that object on the market to be judged, to see what others think about this object. So in this sea of uncertainty, we're constantly looking for stability. Markets help use this information and compress it down into small prices. Only stable things stay on the market. Stable companies that provide consistent products that don't break down will stay. Those that do not will fail and not be priced into the market. Money is our main tool for expressing value. So some might say, why do we even need money in the first place? Real money allows us for markets to emerge. If there's no money, there's no data shared. There's no prices, no unit of account, and no economy. We go back to trading information rather than compressing it into information to equal small prices. We will always need money in order for markets to work. So if we go back hundreds of thousands of years ago, when a unit of account did not take place, it was simply a barter system. It was trading. How many chickens for your one cow? But if there's not a base unit of account that we can all rely on that says, hey, we place value here, it's very hard for us to develop and emerge as a successful economy and as a species to advance. So quick kind of recap. Markets discover stability. Money is needed to measure or quantify stability, and value is the mathematical expression of stability. So how does one measure value? Value is subjective. In fact, it isn't even relative in space and time. It depends on the observer, on where they're looking at where the value is placed. If value was subjective, though, it would be able to land on the periodic table. The problem is that right now, value is not subjective. But in order to find such an element, we would need a reference point. We need a reference point as a measurement tool, and then everything else is measured relative to that reference point. That is exactly what we've done with weight, distance, time, right? We have hours, minutes for time. We have kilograms, pounds for weight. We have meters, inches, yards for length. This is what we have developed as a reference point for all three of those topics named. The one thing that we must make sure is that our reference point never changes. If it changes, it's not comparable across time, and we've lost the entire benefit of having a measurement tool. Our reference point should contain all of the traits that make money a good store of value, and ultimately hard money and stable, which are scarcity. It needs to be scarce. It can't be infinite. It needs to be durable, meaning it can be used over and over again. Essentially, that's why gold became our unit of account, because it was very durable, right? Couldn't break down. You couldn't change its property traits. Seashells, beads, those things all broke down, and we developed a better way to exchange value. Portable. It needs to be easily carried around. It needs to be light. It needs to be easily exchanged. Acceptability. We need to have some sort of acceptance across a nation state or across the globe that this is an acceptable form of trading value. Divisibility is the other one. It needs to be easily subdivided. Gold lacks this property trait, whereas a dollar bill can be divided into 100 base units known as pennies. Fungibility, it's a one of one. I can trade you $1, you give me $1 back, we both have $1. And finally is a new trait that has come about in the most recent years, one that we lost thousands of years ago, which is immutability. Gold was immutable. It could not be counterfeited. It only exists in one stable state, otherwise known as just purely gold. Dollars, unfortunately, are not immutable. You can create them out of thin air. So now, using our knowledge of the universe, we're going to discover the best reference object for the measurement of value. We are now going to be searching for a new element that contains all of these property traits of money, and that is stable. In order to measure stability through markets, our measurement tool also needs to be stable. Right now, it makes no sense that we are using a less stable object, the US dollar, who has lost over 95% of its purchasing power since inception, to measure something of higher stability. So if we are to measure real value and real prices, our reference object must also come from the same group of things or elements from what we are measuring. It can't be something artificial. Again, we need something stable. Since we are looking for a stable object as our reference tool, we don't need to look far, as we've already discovered the majority of the stable elements on the periodic table. So we can go back to the periodic table, which only holds stable isotopes. But which one to pick? First, we need to remove all of the radioactive elements. These are harmful to us, they will eventually erode, and therefore lack our durability component. They are not a good choice for our measurement tool. So basically, all the highlighted light blue elements that you see here, we are going to remove as they are radioactive. So we removed now all of the radioactive elements, and now we've removed all of the non-noble elements, as these elements will interact with other elements and they can deteriorate over time. So very quickly, we've eliminated multiple elements, and we are now only left with the noble gases on the far right and the noble elements there in the middle. Noble metals in the middle. So we now need to remove the gases. Obviously, as a gas, they're difficult to manage, and some are toxic to humans. So now we are left with 9 elements. Mercury on the far right is liquid at room temperature, but also easy to divide. But as we found out years ago, it is toxic to humans. Same with osmium on the far left. So that leaves us down to 7 with removing those 2 elements. So out of the 7, let's break it down to identifying which elements only have one true form. We don't want our measurement tool for stable prices to be easily corruptible or remain cheap, similar to fiat currencies. So now we have our 2 finalists after removing basically what we found, that rhodium and gold are only available in one component. They're what's called mononucleate, which means they're only available in one form of matter. So we have our champion, which is gold, has a 5,000-year track record, and then rhodium. Rhodium was only found about 200 years ago, and has a relatively low stock-to-flow ratio compared to gold. So someday, maybe in the future, this element could work, but for now, gold is the true winner. There's been problems with gold, as we've seen. Gold is eventually corrupted. So the 7 property traits that we listed earlier, it fails most with the portability trait. It's heavy and not easily scaled across space. It becomes centralized in vaults and banks by governments, who then issue debt coupons stating that they are the same thing as gold. Gold really starts to fail in an economy when we discover the use of electricity and the ability to send messages and value using the magnetic spectrum for low cost, and that can be sent almost instantly. It's very hard and expensive to send gold across the globe, whereas I can send it in seconds using the electronic field. But is it possible that we've missed something out of all the elements that we've gone through? Rather than just looking for a certain element, what if we were to create one? So let's reverse engineer what we're looking for and assign this new element the traits that we need it to function as a stability measurement tool or as money. So if we're going to create something, it should be noble like gold, which means there's no oxidation. So the far right-hand side of that box, there's no oxidation. We don't want it to deteriorate. It has to be durable. Ideally, it should have 0 weight, no weight. No weight would allow for faster transactions and it to be sent through the magnetic field at the speed of light. If it has no protons, no neutrons, its atomic weight would be 0, placing it on the upper left-hand side of the periodic table. This element must be able to bind electricity. This is a very important part. Electricity or energy is the currency of the universe. So if we had an element with no protons, no neutrons, no mass that didn't interact with electricity, it wouldn't be able to interact with us. It wouldn't be considered real. And last, it should require a high amount of energy to destroy it. It should be very durable, like gold. The second law of thermodynamics states that energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed. So remember, everything in the universe has a set supply of energy. It's fixed. This circle here kind of represents the entire fixed amount of energy within the universe. Out of the entire energy pool that's already in the universe, only 4% is allocated towards things of matter or things that we can interact with on a daily basis. Gold only makes up about 0.001% of that energy or lower, but it still allocates this energy. For something to be considered to be real to us as human beings, it must borrow from that pool of energy. If it doesn't, we don't consider it real. So we are looking for an element like gold that carries a unique fingerprint and carries proof that it is binding energy from that pool of fixed energy within the universe. But what would that fingerprint look like? If our element carries no protons, no neutrons, it has no mass. It's very difficult to identify. So now we must introduce Landor's principle. Essentially, you cannot create something for free in this world. This principle states that information can't be released for free, that it requires a minimal amount of energy to be used in the form of heat or energy to release that information. This principle has been verified in quantum computing in 2018, and this scheme is used in computer science using a secure hash function. We know this hash function as proof of work. This proof of work algorithm is our fingerprint to measure our new element. By looking at this hashing number, you can see how much energy it to produce the hashing function that it registered. So this new element that we are looking for with no weight, no location, could be synthesized using a regular computer's electricity through computation to produce a unique fingerprint to prove enough energy was spent to prove that the existence of this magical element is real. Unlike gold, where you would need to actually hold the physical gold bar and you'd have to count the protons and the neutrons to prove or validate that it's real, this new element could be verified anywhere in the universe using a regular computer. In November 2008, we received our first written white paper from a pseudonymous creator called Satoshi Nakamoto on how this element exists. In March of 2009, they published a technology showing how quantities of this element could be used and detected. They also suggested a name, a symbol, and a color that could be added to the periodic table. This argument is that just like gold, Bitcoin was not invented, but rather discovered and has existed since the birth of the universe. In this universe, Bitcoin is as real as gold. It constantly and publicly allocates energy from this universe's limited pool to energy to prove that it exists. Since the discovery of Bitcoin, otherwise known as BTC 2009, they have been able to successfully synthesize other forms of isotopes with slightly different configurations, tokenomics, but they are all short-lived and ultimately unstable. These cryptocurrencies or altcoins act identical to how paper notes were artificially created on top of stable metals. Maximum employment and price stability is the dual mandate that the Fed has been appointed to uphold within our United States. As we discussed earlier, for something to act as a measurement tool for stability, it should not ever change. The immutability trait to money would fix this if the US dollar was truly immutable, but it is not. Living in a universe with a predetermined amount of energy, we know that in order for it to be considered real, it needs to borrow from this pool of energy. Unfortunately, the US dollar costs nothing to produce and is constantly expanded. Prices have only gone one direction, along with debt, which is the only thing that makes our money supply somewhat real and tangible. Each time a more superior money supply has been introduced into society, it supersedes the previous one. The discovery of Bitcoin has placed us in a new way of sending and exchanging value. We developed a technology to prove its existence and make it a cap supply of 21 million. It serves as the ultimate stability measurement tool, as no government can counterfeit it, no CEO can change its algorithm, and anyone with a cell phone or computer can access it. With the discovery of Bitcoin, owning and knowing of something become one and the same. When you self-custody Bitcoin, when you self-custody Bitcoin, what you own is the unique 24 words that allow you to safeguard this information. By simply knowing these words, this information, it allows you to hold value or send value without the help of a third party. So my whole argument, again, piggybacking on the book of 21 million, guys, is that Bitcoin is potentially the last money that we will ever need. It is the truest form of money. rather than being invented, it was discovered. With the use of Bitcoin, we do not need the ability of a third party to send value, to receive value. It is stored with pure information, even in our own minds, even though it is actually stored in a hot or cold wallet. So we went through that very quickly. I hope that makes sense. But that is the ultimate presentation for the discovery of Bitcoin versus the invention of Bitcoin, and that everything that we human beings do is exchanging value and is exchanging of information. So as we move into a digital age of information, I feel that our money should also represent that, which is pure information.